What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining us on another FCP Euro DIY. Today, we're going to be working on a 2016 BMW 535i F10. Today on the F10 behind me, we're going to be covering how to replace your front wheel bearings, and this is going to be applicable to your rear-wheel drive F10 vehicles, as well as your F01, F02s, F06s, F10s, F11, F12s, and even F13s. Again, rear-wheel drive vehicles only. In front of us, we have a Schaeffler kit, which contains wheel bearing and hub assembly. It also includes the hardware needed to bolt these into the vehicle. They're one-time use bolts, so you definitely want to replace them. Added to that, which are also linked in the description below and available on fcpo.com, is the other alternative hardware that's going to be needed that you're going to go through when you're doing this job, meaning the set screws for the rotors, the hardware for the caliper carrier bolts, and the locking nuts for the lower control arms that we're going to be removing to access some of this hardware. Typically, wheel bearings can last you anywhere from 60 to 100,000 miles. That's not to say that they can't last longer than that. A good example is my wagon's got 250K. Still going on the original wheel bearings. The other day we did an F30 with 88,000 miles. One of the wheels were about to fall out. So there's really no strict rule of thumb here on how long they're going to last, but a couple ways to tell if they're going bad is usually you start hearing kind of like a whirring or burbling noise coming from whichever wheel is affected. Once that gets worse, it starts to get louder, and in extreme cases it starts to actually physically change the way the car's driving. So something you can do is jack up the wheel, check for left and right play, up and down, and if you have a lot of play in all those directions, more than likely you have a bad wheel bearing. So you definitely want to stop driving and replace that immediately. With that, it's also worth being noted that you want to do them in pairs. So if one of your front wheel bearings has gone bad, do both the fronts. If one of the rears has gone bad, you get the idea, do both the rears, because once one goes, the other one's going to go too. But before we get started into how to replace these wheel hub assemblies, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this DIY. All right, my good people, for this job, it may look like we have a lot of tools going on here. It's really pretty simple, actually. Just some of them are duplicates, and there's a couple different ways to do it. Most importantly are going to be special sockets, if you will. For that, we have an E16, a T60, and a T50. Those will be the more uncommon ones, if you will. From there, we have a 24 mil socket, a 17 mil socket, a 6 mil hex. That's a socket bit. I have a couple adapters for 3/8 to 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch to 3/8, as well as a couple extensions for those. Going along with those, we have a 1/2 inch and 3/8 drive wrench, as well as a 1/2 inch torque wrench, a hook for our caliper. If you don't have a hook, use a bungee cord or some zip ties, even a clothes hanger. It's just something to hang the caliper with. Small flathead screwdriver is always handy. We have a hammer just to beat off the old wheel bearings. Some electric tools make this job a little bit quicker and easier. You'll need some penetrating fluid depending on how rusty your hardware is. We have some Liqui Moly ceramic paste, which I love using whenever I'm taking off brake discs or putting them back on. Some brake cleaner makes life a little bit easier. Something that I enjoy using whenever I'm doing end links or any sort of suspension work, especially when there's counterhold things involved, is the CTA pass-through socket set. This is CTA 7466. I'm going to be using this to remove the lower control arm and probably installing it too, depending on how that goes. Sometimes you can zap the nuts off. Sometimes you need a counterhold. So we have that tool handy just in case. Paint marker is always good, or torque seal, just something to help you do markings of hardware so you know where everything is, especially if we have some torque T yield bolts that we're going to be working with today. So that's going to be super handy there. We have some oxidation more than likely on the hub assemblies, especially some galvanic corrosion, which we're going to be blasting off. We have some safety goggles for that, which is why we have the wire wheel here on the drill. So just keep that in mind if you're doing some cleaning up like that. Wear some eye protection, keep those eyeballs safe. Now with that, let's go ahead and get started on this DIY. All right, my good people, today we're going to be working on the passenger side of the F10. However, the process is going to be identical for both sides of the vehicle. We have 5 17mm lug bolts to remove. If you're not using an impact, which I suggest you do, you want to break these free on the ground first. Then you can raise up the vehicle and remove the lug bolts the rest of the way. We're going to zap these out using the 17 mil socket. One thing you may want to consider when doing this job is getting fresh lug bolts, especially if yours are old and crusty. We have some CRP units available on fcpo.com. They're pretty inexpensive and they make the overall setup here look pretty nice. So just something to keep in mind. Now that we have the wheel off, we have a better view of where we're going to be working. The next thing I like to do is make sure that this set screw is going to come out. If the set screw can't come out, then we're not going to be getting anything done today. I take a flathead screwdriver and just feed it in between one of the vanes of the disc here, in the middle of the caliper. It just kind of helps lock everything in, just to give you a better view. This is what that looks like right over here. And then we take our 6mm hex, get that fed in. You want to make sure whenever you're dealing with this type of hardware that you feed it all the way in so you don't risk stripping the hardware. And if you need to, hit it with your favorite penetrant, let it sit for a few minutes, and then get back to it. A little hammer to shock it free, never hurts. And then we can break that free. There we go. Flathead is just acting as a stop to kind of hold that. We'll leave that in there for now until we're ready to pull the disc off. That way nothing falls on us and hurts us. Up here, I'm just going to pull the soft line out of the metal grommet that holds it in place, or pull the rubber grommet from the soft line out of this metal bracket, I should say. And that's going to allow us a little bit more flex when we pull the brake caliper off to swing it around and hang it off to the side. So that's fine there. And now with that, we can hop over to the back of the brake caliper. We're going to grab our caliper hook, get that primed. I just like to hang it off of a coil spring typically on a car like this. So that should be fine there. And then once we get this off and over the way, we can manipulate it a little bit more and put it to where we need. We have two E16s back here that we're going to remove. And these are one of the pieces of hardware linked on the description below that BMW recommends you replace whenever you remove them. So whoever's been in here before has completely butchered that bolt. Good thing we're replacing it, but it doesn't make our life easier for removal. I'm going to see if I can tap the socket on. Now with that, we can go ahead and take up the top E16, holding the caliper as it's going to be ready to fall. And I'll walk and make slight work of that. And now we can use our caliper hook and hang it off to the side. And that should allow us to just hang it off gently to the side. There's no weird strain on the soft line. We're good to go. At which point we can now straighten this sub-assembly up for just a moment. If your disc is not loose, use a soft rubber mallet to get that free, especially if you're not replacing it. Another alternative move would be to take a bigger screwdriver, something bigger than this, feed it into one of the vanes, kind of work it back and forth until you free it up. Luckily ours is pretty loose, so we're going to take the 6mm hex and just get it off the rest of the way. Even though the set screw is fine, we are going to be replacing it, and I might throw some fresh lug bolts in there too and take my own advice. But for now, we're going to set these off to the side, and we'll pick it back up here in just a moment. One quick tip, my good people, it doesn't hurt to wire wheel the outside ends, the exposed ends of the bolts that hold in the hub assembly. I just hit them with the wire wheel really quick, with your favorite penetrating fluid. It'll just make life a little bit easier, especially if they're rusty when you go to remove them. But with that, we're going to let that soak, do its thing. We're going to hop underneath and work on undoing the lower control arm ball joint end so that we can move that out of our way, and that'll give us access to the bolts from the back. So let's do that now. All right. Now we're going to work on removing the 24mm nut that holds our forward control arm. That's blocking one of the 4 bolts that hold the hub assembly in place. So we're going to loosen that one first, and then we can get the 4 bolts out afterwards. This does have a T50 counterhold in the middle. What I'm going to do here is try to kind of pull down on the arm, blast it with the Milwaukee, and see if it'll come all the way. Sometimes we'll just break the initial torque seal first, and then we'll have to go in with the counterhold and the pass-through socket set. So we'll see what we get here. I've soaked it, I've cleaned up the threads a little bit. That was lucky, because when I did the other side, it didn't get quite that effect. But just to give you a better visual, let's say yours did not come out like that, you weren't able to get a good grip on the arm or the tapered end. You can do this with a pass-through socket set like we're doing today. You can do it with a wrench and a counterhold. For the visual, using the CTA tool, we would have our 24mm socket on the nut. We'd get our T50 through, so that would be sitting inside like so. Make sure it sits in all the way, and then we would be undoing this nut while we counterhold. But now that this arm is nice and loose, we can move it out of our way and manipulate it. Let's get ready to get these 4 T60s out. So what I'm trying to do here is I've turned the wheel on the other side, and I'm going to try to use a Milwaukee for most of these T60s. I think this bottom corner one I'm going to have to do by hand. but this will just allow us to get them out a little bit easier. Sorry about the lighting, but we're just getting the tool in. Again, these are one-time use, so we're not going to be saving these. So also part of the kit, so no need to worry there. Just pushing the caliper out of my way. We're just going to blast the top one, same thing. Now I'm going to hop over to the other side, rotate the wheel assembly over so that the front half of these hardware bolts are exposed. So for this one, we're going to go manual. I'm going to pull out the 1/2-inch ratchet and just break it free that way. Once we crack the bolt free or the initial torque free, then we can go in with the small electric ratchet and just zap it out. Make sure when you're doing this that you have a good bite. The last thing you want to do is strip out these bolts with these funky heads, and you'll have a bad time. Beautiful. All right, I'm gonna straighten out this hub assembly and we'll move up front and work on getting it off. One thing to note, the hub assemblies have this little tab on them. You wanna make sure when you install your new one that you install it the same way. So just pay attention to how these are whenever you're doing them on any car. In this case, this one has a little tab that is not on the other side. We wanna make sure that our new one faces the same way. All right, now we're gonna work the old hub assembly off. We have the BFH. We're just gonna hit it from the back, get it started, and then we should be able to get it off. Corrosion's obviously gonna make this a little bit harder. You know, you have aluminum and steel together, it's a great mix. And here's the back of where our hub assembly lives. Now, there's always an opening down here for release of debris or residue, for release of debris and any condensation or water that may get in here. Your sensor, your wheel speed sensor is located right up top of here. So you wanna be mindful when you're cleaning up this area or working in here that you don't hit that or damage it. You can clean it, of course, it's not that delicate. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take a wire wheel, clean up some of this corrosion. Again, not looking to hit this up here. This is nice and clean up here, so no problem. It's usually by the opening that we get the corrosion. So we'll clean that up, and then we'll get ready to install the new hub assembly. All right, we're gonna clean this up a little bit, let it dry, and then we're gonna use a little bit of, I like to use a little bit of ceramic paste just on the sealing edge here to kind of give it a easier chance to come off next time this job has to be done, and hopefully help keep some of this corrosion from forming again. So I'm gonna wipe that down, we'll get some paste on. All right, at this point, we're gonna install our new hub assembly. We have the protective cap on here still, which I like to keep on until the end, so we get nothing on the magnetic ring, any debris or any of that good, bad stuff. Small tab, you can see the top half, like the old one, has nothing. The bottom one has the small little tab on it that's gonna be pointing down. So we just wanna make sure we keep that in that orientation. We're gonna gently feed this on, doing our best job to line up the bolt holes. It's gonna kind of snug up a little bit, and now we're just gonna reach around from behind and get the hardware all started by hand. The initial torque value for these bolts are 20 Newton meters, and what BMW means by that is basically you just wanna make sure that this hub assembly is snug down flat and even to the face of the hub here. So to replicate that in our own way, we're just gonna use the electric ratchet. Crisscross pattern always when you're tightening down these types of bolts on these hub assemblies, so that way everything gets snugged down evenly. So our initial 20 Newton meters will be done with the electric ratchet. All right, now we're gonna get a little bit more comfortable, and we're gonna torque these down to 120 Newton meters first, followed by an additional 90 degrees. Start with the bottom here. There's no particular one you need to start with, whichever one you're more comfortable with. Again, make sure your T60 is situated all the way in. All right, now we're gonna make a mark on all four of them so that we can see once we've done our 90 degrees. If you have a torque wrench with an angle mode, that would be a great time to use that. All right, now we're gonna do our 90-degree turns on all four, again, keeping to that crisscross pattern. always like to use a little bit of torque seal to mark my work. Now we're gonna do bottom left. Take your time with this, my good people. There's no rush. There's no reason to rush. This is almost semi-last step of this job. All right, with that situated, we can get this lower control arm situated back into its home. We're gonna try the same thing again, where we're gonna pull down on the arm, get the tapered end to catch, and then hopefully snug it up with the Milwaukee just enough so that we can get to a point where we can torque it. That's nice and nice. Make sure these threads are nice and clean. New locking nut always. All right. A little bit of downward pressure. 24 mil socket. So at this point, we're just spinning. So we don't want to spin the ball joint in there too much and damage the arm. So we're going to switch over to the counterhold method with the pass-through socket set. Again, you can use a wrench, a 24 mil wrench, and repeat this as well. We're just going to snug it up. Once it's snug up, it'll stop spinning inside, and then we can torque it down properly. T50 to counterhold, 24 mil on the pass-through. Okay, that's pretty lightly snugged. This should be more than enough. Now we can set our torque wrench to 100 Newton meters for the initial torque down. There's our 100. And we'll just do a little paint mark so that we can keep an eye on our quarter turn. All right, my good people, with that situated, that's the hard stuff done. Let's get these brakes back on and wrap up this DIY. All right, my good people, now comes my favorite part of any new hub installation, and that's to be able to have some ceramic paste go on here to protect that from oxidizing and keeping our brake disc nice and loose. Well, not loose, but easy to remove next time we do this job or a brake job or anything like that. Now, most of this is probably overkill, but I like to focus on where the set screws go. Those are so tedious when they get seized in there and you have to drill them out or any of that stuff. So this will make life easier. Now we're going to take our rotor and our new set screw and get those ready to rock and roll. Again, being mindful of the brake disc, you don't want to contaminate the surfaces. Try to grab them on the edges if you can, or wash your hands, or change out your gloves if they're really grimy. It's beautiful right there. Get this one going. 6 mil hex. All right, that's going to keep it from falling on us. Torque spec for the 6 mil hex set screw is 16 Newton meters. Personally, we're just going to go ahead and go nice and snug using the old calibrated wrist, but 6 millimeter hex, 16 Newton meters. I like to encapsulate these to keep moisture out of them. I'd rather have to clean up some paste next time I do this job or get in this car than have to deal with rust. Now, we're gonna grab our new caliper carrier hardware. We're gonna swing this caliper back into place and get those snug up by hand, and then we'll torque them down and get the soft line situated. We're gonna unhook our caliper hook. Don't forget to take that out. I can't tell you how many I've seen drive away and they still have their hook hanging onto the car. We're gonna get this caliper back on. Make sure your pads haven't moved. If they did, just kind of push them back into their home. And then now we're gonna work on getting the E16 situated by hand first. I'm gonna start with the top one so I can hold the caliper where I need it. Okay, there's a few threads on that. We're gonna do a few threads on the bottom one. We're gonna snug them up with the electric ratchet. Then we're gonna torque these down to 110 Newton meters. Let's set the torque wrench to 110. All right, there's two. Just gonna go ahead and take care of the soft line now, tuck that back into the metal bracket. And now we have everything nice and buttoned up, my good people. Next and last on the list is to put our wheel back on. So let's do that now. I took my own advice, ended up saying yes to the dress. We have some fresh CRP lug bolts going in. Those will be linked in the description below as well if you decide to pick some up, which these, I mean, this car, you know, it's not the first or the least of its problems, but it's a start in the right direction. With that, let's lower her down and we'll torque them up. With the car back on the ground, we're going to torque the wheels down in a crisscross pattern All 5 17mm lug bolts to 140 Newton meters. All right, my good people, and with that is going to conclude this DIY for today. Overall, a really straightforward and easy job on the rear-wheel drive F10s. Again, applicable to a couple other models as well, but a straightforward DIY. Lift makes the job a lot easier, but certainly something you can do in the driveway. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, or there's a specific F10 related chassis DIY that you want to see, drop that in the comment section below. And if you like this DIY and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.